Do you know who dared to open the doors of education to poor children when learning was still largely a privilege of the wealthy and powerful? Imagine a priest walking through the crowded streets of Rome, seeing neglected boys with no school, no future, and little hope, and deciding that their lives could not simply be forgotten. He gave them books, faith, dignity, and a future. But the mission he built would one day be torn apart before his own eyes. This is the extraordinary story of Saint Joseph Calasanz. Before beginning, drop an amen in the comments if you're ready to learn more, and hit the like button if you're excited to dive deeper into this extraordinary story. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to follow along with the next inspiring stories of the saints. Chapter 1. Childhood and Family. Joseph Calasanz was born on the 11th of September, 1557, in Peralta de la Sal, a small village in Aragon, Spain. Surrounded by rugged hills, farmland, and a deeply Catholic culture, he grew up in a world where faith shaped the rhythm of ordinary life. No one could have imagined that this boy from a quiet Spanish village would one day change the history of Christian education. His father, Pedro de Calasanz y de Mur, was a respected local official known for discipline and responsibility. His mother, Maria Gaston y de Sala, brought warmth, tenderness, and devotion into the home. Together, they raised their children in prayer, obedience, generosity, and loyalty to the Church. Joseph would carry those lessons throughout his life. The youngest of 8 children, Joseph learned early to listen, observe, and serve. Surrounded by older brothers and sisters, he developed patience and humility. His family gave him both security and discipline, teaching him that love was expressed not merely through words, but through sacrifice and responsibility. From childhood, Joseph showed an unusual seriousness. He possessed a strong memory, a quick mind, and a natural attraction to prayer. While other children were absorbed in games, Joseph was often drawn to sacred stories, mass, and moments of quiet reflection. His teachers soon noticed that he was gifted not only intellectually, but spiritually. Compassion also appeared early in his character. When he encountered people in need, Joseph was moved to help. He shared what he had and showed particular concern for those who were poor or forgotten. Long before he understood his future mission, the seeds of service were already taking root within him. Joseph began his education in his village, excelling in reading, writing, and catechism. He loved learning, but knowledge never became a source of pride. For him, truth belonged to God. Study and faith were not separate paths. Both were ways of drawing closer to the Creator. Later, his parents sent him to study under the Trinitarian friars in Estudillo. There, surrounded by prayer, discipline, and serious learning, Joseph's vocation began to take clearer shape. Somewhere within those quiet years of study, a desire grew steadily in his heart. He wanted to become a priest and give his life completely to God. Chapter 2. Studies and the Call of Vocation. Joseph's intelligence eventually brought him to the University of Lleida, where he studied philosophy and law. He distinguished himself through discipline and academic ability, but success did not satisfy him for its own sake. The more he learned, the more convinced he became that knowledge should be placed at the service of God and others. He continued his studies in theology, first in Valencia and later at Alcalá de Henares. Scripture, moral theology, philosophy, and pastoral formation deepened his understanding of the priesthood. Unlike those who sought education as a path to prestige, Joseph increasingly saw learning as preparation for service. Yet one obstacle remained close to home. His father hoped Joseph would marry and continue the family line. Joseph loved and respected him deeply, which made the conflict painful. He did not want to wound his father, but neither could he silence the conviction growing within him that Christ was calling him to the altar. Then sorrow entered the family. The deaths of Joseph's mother and one of his brothers forced him to confront the fragility of earthly life. Grief did not destroy his vocation. Instead, it purified it. He understood more deeply that everything passes, while a life surrendered to God bears eternal fruit. In 1582, Joseph himself became seriously ill. Facing the possibility of death, he examined the direction of his life with new urgency. The experience stripped away hesitation. If God restored his health, Joseph knew exactly how he wished to spend the years remaining to him as a priest of Jesus Christ. His father eventually recognized the firmness and sincerity of this vocation. Reluctantly, surrendering his own hopes, Pedro gave Joseph his blessing. For the young man, it was a moment of profound peace. The tension between filial obedience and God's call had finally been resolved. Joseph entered his final preparation for ordination with renewed seriousness. Prayer, penance, study, silence, and the sacraments shaped him more deeply than academic achievement ever could. God was not merely preparing an educated priest. He was forming a shepherd whose heart would one day belong especially to abandoned children. Chapter 3. Priesthood in Spain. On the 17th of December, 1583, Joseph Calasanz was ordained a priest. After years of discernment and struggle, the desire he had carried since youth became reality. From that day forward, his life belonged in a new way to Christ and his church. Joseph entered service in the Diocese of Albarracin, where Bishop Gaspar Juan de la Figuera quickly recognized his intelligence, discipline, and spiritual maturity. He entrusted the young priest with important responsibilities, beginning a period in which Joseph gained valuable experience in the pastoral and administrative life of the church. He served in several capacities as theologian, confessor, examiner, and administrator. He preached, heard confessions, assisted church authorities, and cared for ordinary believers. Whatever duty was placed before him, Joseph approached it seriously, seeing even administrative work as an opportunity to serve God faithfully. Yet his heart was repeatedly drawn beyond official responsibilities toward the poor. He helped struggling families and sought assistance for those without food or security. Charity was never an abstract principle to him. The gospel demanded that suffering be encountered personally. Joseph himself lived simply. Though he came from a respected family and possessed considerable education, he had little interest in comfort or status. His modest habits gave credibility to his preaching. He did not merely speak about detachment, he practiced it. Traveling on ecclesiastical missions also exposed Joseph to the wider needs of the church. He saw parishes struggling, priests carrying heavy burdens, families living in hardship, and children growing up with few opportunities. These encounters gradually broadened his vision of what Christian ministry could become. Still, a quiet restlessness remained within him. Joseph was serving faithfully, yet he sensed that God had prepared something more specific. He did not yet know its form. He only knew that his heart was being drawn toward those whom society overlooked. Providence would soon lead him far from Spain and into the mission that would define his life. Chapter 4. Journey to Rome, a turning point. In 1592, Joseph traveled to Rome. He arrived in the Eternal City, already an experienced priest, perhaps imagining that his future service would unfold close to the heart of the church. Instead, Rome would overturn his plans and reveal a vocation he had never expected. Cardinal Marco Antonio Colonna welcomed Joseph and entrusted him with responsibilities in his household. The position offered security, connections, and a respectable ecclesiastical future. Joseph performed his duties faithfully, but something within him remained unsatisfied. Honor was not what he had come to seek. Outside the great churches and palaces, another Rome confronted him. In narrow streets and crowded neighborhoods, Joseph saw children living in poverty, many without education, discipline, or hope. Some wandered the streets because their families could not afford schooling. Their condition disturbed him deeply. Joseph began gathering boys together and teaching them simple lessons in catechism, reading, and writing. What appeared to be a small act of charity soon became something much greater. He discovered that education could rescue a child, not only from ignorance, but often from a lifetime of marginalization. Through the confraternity of Christian doctrine, Joseph became increasingly involved in teaching, yet his approach possessed a distinctive tenderness. He did not regard poor children as problems to be controlled. He saw them as souls entrusted by God, worthy of patience, dignity, and serious formation. Day after day, the conviction became stronger. Joseph gradually understood that he had not come to Rome merely for church advancement. Providence had brought him there for these children. What appeared humble in the world's eyes was becoming the center of his priestly vocation. The realization changed everything. Joseph began to dream of schools where poverty would never close the door to knowledge, schools where faith and education would form young people together. The abandoned children of Rome had revealed God's will to him. From then on, their future became his life's mission. Chapter 5. The First Free School. In 1597, Joseph took the decisive step. With the assistance of the pastor of Santa Dorotea in Trastevere, he began teaching poor children in simple rooms near the church. The setting was modest, the resources scarce, but the principle was revolutionary. Children who could not pay would still be educated. A few priests soon joined him. Together they taught reading, writing, arithmetic, and catechism without demanding payment. The rooms were poor in material comforts, yet rich in purpose. For children accustomed to exclusion, simply being welcomed into a classroom restored a sense of dignity. News spread quickly. Families who had never imagined schooling for their children began bringing them to Joseph. The rooms filled, then overflowed. Boys who once spent their days in the streets now recited prayers, formed letters, solved problems, and discovered possibilities their parents had never known. By 1600, the work had grown far beyond its original setting. Joseph sought larger and more permanent facilities. His vision was becoming clear. Education should unite religious formation with useful knowledge, preparing poor children for both Christian life and meaningful participation in society. The mission began attracting support. Pope Clement VIII provided assistance, while other benefactors contributed money, books, and facilities. Joseph welcomed their generosity, but insisted that everything serve one purpose: the children. Buildings and donations mattered only insofar as they allowed more young lives to be transformed. The number of pupils continued to rise dramatically. Children who had once been considered burdens now filled classrooms with learning and prayer. Joseph looked upon them not as statistics, but as individuals created in God's image. To educate a child, he believed, was to serve Christ himself. The humble school at Santa Dorotea had become something far larger than Joseph initially imagined. A priest had dared to challenge the assumption that education belonged mainly to those who could afford it. In opening a classroom to the poor, Joseph had opened a new path for Catholic education, and his work was only beginning. Chapter 6. The founding of the Pious Schools. As the schools multiplied, Joseph realized that the mission could not depend on him alone. In 1602, he gathered companions willing to share his life of prayer, sacrifice, and service to children. What had begun as an individual apostolate was slowly becoming a religious community. Joseph wanted teachers who understood that education involved far more than transferring information. A child possessed a mind, a heart, and an immortal soul. Teachers therefore had to unite knowledge with virtue, discipline with patience, and intellectual formation with the love of Christ. By 1610, Joseph expressed much of this educational vision in the Documentum Princeps. His approach placed extraordinary emphasis on care for the child. Teaching should form rather than crush, encourage rather than humiliate, and lead the student toward both wisdom and holiness. The mission soon expanded outside Rome. In 1616, a school was opened in Frascati, demonstrating that Joseph's model could flourish beyond the capital. Other communities began requesting the same kind of education for their children. In 1617, Pope Paul V formally recognized Joseph's community as the Pauline Congregation of the Poor of the Mother of God, of the Pious Schools. For Joseph and his companions, the approval brought both joy and responsibility. The Church had recognized that their work possessed a genuine and enduring charism. 4 years later, in 1621, Pope Gregory XV elevated the community into a religious order, the Order of Poor Clerics, regular of the Mother of God of the Pious Schools. Joseph became Superior General. The school that had begun in borrowed rooms now stood at the heart of a new religious family. The Piarists were born with a clear mission: to serve children through Christian education, especially those who were poor. Joseph's personal vocation had become a shared calling. What one priest had begun in response to suffering was now entrusted to generations of religious who would carry it far beyond Rome. Chapter 7. A Vision of Progressive Education. Joseph Calasanz believed that poverty should never determine whether a child could learn. His schools welcomed children who might otherwise have remained illiterate orphans, sons of laborers, and families unable to pay traditional school fees. In the classroom, social barriers began to lose their power. His concern extended even beyond social class. Joseph's educational vision was marked by an unusual willingness to receive children from different backgrounds. What mattered most was the child before him, a human person created by God and capable of growth in knowledge and virtue. Language was central to his method. Latin remained important as the language of scholarship and church culture, but Joseph also valued instruction that children could understand and use in daily life. Education had to be more than an ornament for the privileged. It had to prepare young people for reality. He also gave mathematics and scientific learning an important place in the curriculum. Joseph saw no necessary conflict between serious intellectual inquiry and faith. The created world came from God, and therefore studying it carefully could awaken both reason and wonder. Perhaps most distinctive was his approach to discipline. In an era when physical punishment and fear were common educational tools, Joseph urged patience and gentleness. Authority remained necessary, but it should form children rather than humiliate them. For him, a teacher must guide with the heart of Christ. Joseph also understood that education concerned the whole person. Cleanliness, order, healthy habits, character, prayer, intellectual growth, and practical preparation belonged together. He wanted his pupils to become not merely clever, but mature and virtuous. At the deepest level, Joseph believed that educating children could transform society. A young person formed in truth, knowledge, faith, and virtue could change a family and eventually an entire community. His classrooms were therefore more than schools. They were places where Joseph hoped a better Christian future could begin. Chapter 8. Friendship with Galileo and Campanella. Joseph's respect for learning brought him into contact with some of the most remarkable intellectual figures of his age, including Galileo Galilei. Joseph admired intellectual excellence and believed that serious study of creation could serve rather than threaten Christian faith when pursued with humility. For that reason, he allowed members of the Piarist community to deepen their knowledge of mathematics and science. The young order did not restrict itself to elementary literacy. Joseph wanted capable teachers who could engage the best learning available in their time. As controversy increasingly surrounded Galileo, association with him became more difficult. Yet Joseph's concern for the aging scientist did not disappear. His attitude showed something characteristic of his personality. He was reluctant to abandon a person simply because that person had become controversial. When Galileo grew old and lost his sight, Joseph arranged for members of the Piarist community to assist him. Whatever larger disputes surrounded the scientist, Joseph saw before him a human being who needed care. Friendship, for him, was proven most clearly when it became costly. Joseph also developed ties with the Dominican philosopher Tommaso Campanella, another controversial intellectual of the period. He was willing to engage difficult ideas rather than retreat from them, provided that intellectual inquiry remained ordered toward truth. Campanella was even connected with the intellectual formation of Piarist students. Joseph understood that education required discernment, not fear. A strong faith did not need ignorance in order to survive. These relationships reveal another dimension of Joseph Calasanz. He was not only an advocate for poor children, but also a priest deeply interested in the harmony of faith and reason. For him, education opened minds precisely so that truth could be sought more deeply, and every authentic truth ultimately belonged to God. Chapter 9. Trials and Misunderstandings. The mission that had grown so rapidly eventually entered a period of darkness. Success brought not only admiration but tension, criticism, and opposition. Joseph's schools challenged established patterns, and the rapid expansion of the Piarists created difficulties that the aging founder struggled increasingly to control. Disputes arose over education, authority, and relationships with other institutions. Joseph had never desired competition. His attention remained fixed on poor children. Yet religious communities, like all human institutions, can experience rivalry, misunderstanding, ambition, and conflict. The most painful crisis came from within the Piarist Order itself, especially through the scandal surrounding Father Stefano Cherubini. His misconduct damaged the community and contributed to serious internal disorder. Joseph, already an elderly man, found himself caught in a situation increasingly beyond his control. Accusations and rumors followed. Some questioned Joseph's judgment and his ability to govern. The founder, who had given decades of his life to the mission, now watched suspicion spread around the community he loved. Few sufferings could have wounded him more deeply. By 1642, church authorities were investigating the situation. Joseph cooperated, but the process brought humiliation. He was elderly, exhausted, and forced to defend a work that had once seemed so clearly blessed. Yet his greatest concern was never personal reputation. He feared for the schools and the children depending on them. Then came the devastating decision of 1646. The Piarist Order was reduced to a much weaker form of congregation. The institution Joseph had spent his life building appeared to be collapsing. Communities were threatened, confidence weakened, and the future became uncertain. But Joseph did not abandon God. In the ruins of his plans, he continued praying. He urged his brothers toward patience rather than rebellion, and forgiveness rather than bitterness. The educator, who had taught thousands, now gave perhaps his greatest lesson without a classroom: how to remain faithful when everything one has built seems to fall apart. Chapter 10. The Final Years. Joseph eventually lost leadership of the religious family he had founded. For a man who had spent decades forming and protecting the Pious Schools, the humiliation must have been immense. Yet he refused to let resentment become his final legacy. He accepted his suffering in union with the cross of Christ. Unable to govern publicly as before, Joseph turned increasingly toward prayer, counsel, and quiet encouragement. Younger Piarists continued to approach him as a spiritual father. His authority no longer came from office. It came from a life that had endured sacrifice without surrendering faith. The people of Rome still revered him. They remembered the priest who had gathered poor children when few others cared for them. His frail appearance only made his perseverance more striking. Stripped of institutional power, Joseph seemed spiritually stronger than ever. Some compared his suffering to that of Job. He had seen reputation damaged, authority removed, and the work of a lifetime placed in danger. Yet he continued trusting the providence of God. His holiness was no longer revealed mainly in great achievements, but in his response when those achievements were taken away. And still, his heart belonged to children. Whenever circumstances allowed, Joseph remained close to the schools and encouraged teachers to be patient, gentle, and faithful. Even in old age, he never forgot why the Pious Schools had been created. In 1648, at about 90 years of age, Joseph's strength finally failed. Surrounded by those who loved him, he prepared calmly for death. On August 25, after a life filled with learning, struggle, service, disappointment, and extraordinary perseverance, Joseph Calasanz returned to the Lord. He was buried at San Pantaleo in Rome, a place closely associated with the mission he had spent himself to build. The founder died without seeing the full restoration of his work. Yet the story was not over. God would accomplish after Joseph's death what the old priest had continued to hope for in faith. Chapter 11. Canonization and Legacy. Only 8 years after Joseph's death, the situation of the Piarists began to change. The community that had appeared close to destruction was restored. Joseph had died trusting that the mission belonged ultimately to God, and now the work he loved was given new life. His reputation for holiness also continued to grow. People remembered not simply the schools he founded, but the humility with which he endured their apparent collapse. In 1748, Pope Benedict XIV beatified Joseph Calasanz, formally recognizing the heroic Christian life that many had already admired. In 1767, Pope Clement XIII canonized him. The priest who had once walked Rome searching for abandoned children was now honored throughout the Catholic Church as Saint Joseph Calasanz. His educational mission itself had become a witness to holiness. In 1948, Pope Pius XII proclaimed him the universal patron of Christian schools. The title reflected what Joseph had understood centuries earlier. A classroom can become a place of evangelization, mercy, human dignity, and genuine Christian vocation. Meanwhile, the Piarists spread far beyond Rome. Schools, inspired by Joseph's charism, reached different countries and continents. Languages and cultures changed, but the heart of the mission remained recognizable: to unite knowledge with faith and to give special attention to young people most in need. His educational ideals also anticipated themes later embraced by other great Catholic educators: patience rather than cruelty, personal care rather than indifference, and confidence that young people can grow through love and disciplined guidance. Today, Saint Joseph Calasanz remains a powerful patron for teachers, students, schools, and all who believe education can change a human life. He began with poor children whom society barely noticed. He died after watching his greatest work nearly collapse. Yet centuries later, his mission survives, a reminder that what is planted for God may bear fruit long after the one who planted it has gone home. Chapter 12. A Prayer to Saint Joseph Calasanz. O Saint Joseph Calasanz, faithful servant of God and loving teacher of children, intercede for all educators. You understood that teaching is more than a profession. It is a vocation of patience, sacrifice, and love. Help teachers recognize in every student a precious soul entrusted to their care. Saint Joseph, Father of poor and forgotten children, awaken in us your compassion to open our eyes to young people who lack education, safety, opportunity, or affection. May the Church never turn away from them, but bring them the dignity, hope, and love of Christ. We entrust families to your intercession. Pray for mothers and fathers as they form the hearts of their children. Give them wisdom when they are uncertain, patience when they are weary, and courage to make their homes places of faith, forgiveness, discipline, and love. Holy Patron of students, protect young people in their years of learning, preserve their innocence, strengthen their character, and give them a true desire for wisdom. Guard them from influences that lead away from truth, and help them use their gifts for the glory of God and the good of others. Saint Joseph Calasanz, watch over Catholic schools throughout the world. May they never lose their deepest identity. Help them unite academic excellence with the gospel, forming not only successful minds but holy, compassionate, and courageous hearts. You endured misunderstanding, humiliation, and the apparent destruction of everything you had built. Intercede for us when our own efforts seem to fail. Teach us not to surrender to bitterness, but to trust God's providence. Forgive those who wound us, and remain faithful beneath the cross. Finally, Saint Joseph Calasanz, lead us always toward Christ, the divine teacher. Teach us to serve without seeking praise, to educate with love, to defend the dignity of every child, and to believe that no act of goodness offered to God is ever wasted. May we one day rejoice with you in the eternal classroom of heaven, praising Christ our Lord forever. Amen.